Hi, it's Friday, August 15th, and we're tracking Hurricane Erin in the tropical Atlantic today. You can see the system nearing the northern Leeward Islands as we head throughout this afternoon. And the system is forecast to track generally west-northwest over the coming weekend and into next week, and is likely to become a powerful hurricane in that process as it does so. Now, looking at the system right now, so far in the system's track, we have not really seen all too much significant intensification to this point. The system has been dealing with more stable air, less favorable conditions for intensification for most of its life. This is the sea surface temperature plot showing you the water temperatures across the Atlantic, and you can see where the system had formed and where it's coming from had pretty cold waters for a tropical cyclone, generally 25 to 26 degrees Celsius here, especially northwest of the Cabo Verde Islands. There's also some wind shear that was impacting the system. But now we're further west here, and the waters are getting very warm. Some of the warmest waters in the Atlantic is what it's going to be encountering over the next few days in the western Atlantic. And alongside that, the wind shear has decreased, and we have seen remarkable improvements over the day today with the system's central structure. And you can see that at the end of this loop, especially with the textured cloud tops at the top, I'll pause this at the end here. You might be able to pick out a little bit of a convective burst that wrapped counterclockwise around the center of the storm. It's better seen in this colored infrared imagery here. And you can see again these bursts rotating in a counterclockwise fashion, and this is likely suggesting that we're seeing the formation of an inner core structure, that being an eye wall structure. Now, this does take time to be built, but we are certainly seeing some good improvement today, and I'd imagine we'll be seeing quite a bit of improvement in the wind field in the next recon flight, which will be taking off shortly after this video. Now, speaking of recon, we did have a recon mission earlier this morning, and they were what helped us figure out that this was a hurricane this morning. You can see the strongest winds on the north side of the storm, and the found hurricane force winds in the northeastern side of it, with pressure falls not at a very great pace, not a very rapid pace. That's a word I'm looking for here. But we do see a gradual deepening pace of the pressure down to 993 at the end of this mission. And I'd imagine we've likely continued to drop in that pressure value since this mission had ended. And what this shows you, the system is intensifying. The tighter the pressure gradient, the stronger the winds. And we do actually have a pretty good example on this map alone of what a tight pressure gradient can do. We have a very strong area of high pressure just north of where Erin is, and you can see the lopsided wind profile associated with this hurricane, with very strong winds all on the north side and very weak winds on the south side. This is partly due to that strong area of high pressure up north, and there's a very tight pressure gradient between the center of the storm now and the center of that high pressure, and that's causing very strong winds to be there on the northern side. And that's why it is true that this is a fairly high pressure than you would normally expect for a hurricane. In the MDR, it's not all too uncommon because we have seen some storms with this high of pressure become a hurricane, but generally speaking, this is a little bit high for what you would expect for a hurricane. Now, this also does bode well for the Leeward Islands going forward for this forecast, as we do have fairly weak winds that were observed on this mission on the south side. And we can see, if I go back to this true color imagery, that we are gaining latitude again. We have stopped losing latitude like we were over the past few days. And this is also supported by the recon center fixes. And this is good news because the system is now not going to make a direct hit on these islands. That was a question we had, a few days ago. And rather, we're just going to be dealing with the southern side, which has some outer rain bands, which could lead to some heavy rains and maybe some flooding issues, and maybe some gusts of tropical storm force. But the strongest winds, as you can see from this map, are going to be kept to the northern side. And it's unlikely, at least in my opinion, that we have hurricane force winds or anything near that in these islands. And really the main concern here is going to be heavy rainfall, which could lead to some flooding issues, especially in higher terrain areas like Puerto Rico. Now, I would imagine we are getting a better wind profile taking shape this afternoon with the organization that we're seeing with this eye wall structure. But I think the southern core of the developing eye wall should avoid the islands by quite a bit, and that should leave us with just a southern rain band, so just tropical storm force winds to deal with there. Now, the main question over the past several days has been, where is the system going to go in the future for the US, the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, and Bermuda? And it's certainly been a wild past 10 days, with models going all over the place, showing multiple different scenarios of where this system was going to go. Now, the difference compared to several days ago is that we now actually have Hurricane Erin in a spot that we can initialize off of just northeast of the Caribbean. And the fact that it's gaining latitude now is a very good thing for talking about potential impacts to land further west. If it starts to gain latitude now, it's going to be closer to a break in the ridge, which I can show you here. This is a 500 millibar height map showing you what's basically steering Erin as we go throughout the next few days. Right now we have this area of high pressure across the western Atlantic. This is what's been tracking the system towards the west over the past few days, but we have a couple of shortwave troughs, one here, that are tracking east along the jet stream. This is going to be breaking apart these two ridges so that you see that by Sunday morning, this is by 8 a.m. local time, the storm is now here well north of Puerto Rico, and we have one part of the ridge here over the subtropical Atlantic and one here over the central US. So we now have this break in between thanks to these shortwave troughs which are tracking east. And so Erin being here is close enough to this break that's going to be moving in between these two areas of high pressure and turning to the north. This is a generally agreed upon idea by all models by this point. This is a European out to 5 days showing a very similar concept with these two broken areas of high pressure and Erin coming north, avoiding a direct hit in the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos, the US, and Bermuda. Now, importantly, I should mention that remember that a hurricane is not just one finite point. It is going to be a large area of influence, and Erin will be gaining size as it does move further north. And so one thing we need to watch for still, especially if you're in the Turks and Caicos, Bahamas, east coast of the US, and Bermuda, is that as system continues to track northwest, how far west or east are we by the point we're turning north? We still have some disagreement on model guidance from this. You can see the European here is a little bit further west. It's closer to the Bahamas than the GFS is, which is closer to Bermuda by the day 5 point. And this kind of uncertainty is usual for this kind of a range at 5 days. There is maybe one thing across the US that might be impacting this. You can see we do have a little bit of a trough here over the Great Lakes. The GFS has this a little bit more progressive and stronger. That may be pushing it a little bit further east, keeping it further away from the US coast, but pushing it closer to Bermuda. And the European, or comparison, excuse me, has a weaker but less progressive trough over the mid west, or the northern plains rather, in the US, which might be leaving out some of the westerly push, or easterly push rather, on the storm, which might be leaving it further west. But it also could just be random things that may happen with the storm itself, especially when hurricanes get strong. Their centers can tend to wobble around a bit, and those wobbles can make significant differences in the long range forecast. And something like that we can't tell you with certainty even 3 days out. This is a 5+ day forecast when it would be as closest point to Bermuda and the US East Coast. So right now we're not looking at an imminent threat. We're not looking at a major hurricane landfall in either of these areas, but it still is something to monitor if you're in the Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, US East Coast, and Bermuda as we go forward with time with this system. Here's the GFS ensemble. This is showing you all the different runs of the GFS. It's showing you 31 different members of the GFS ensemble. And it's basically showing you 31 different variations of what could happen with this system's track. And you can see the mean, like I talked about, is in between the US and Bermuda, though we do have some wiggle room. We have some members that are on the European side of that solution that are further west that could increase some impact to the Turks and Caicos, Bahamas, and the US East Coast. And then we have some others on the GFS deterministic run side, which is closer to Bermuda, which could increase some impacts there if it does track further east. Hopefully, we'll hope for the best here, that we do get this perfect scenario in the center of these two land masses and we get out of the way of this system without really seeing all too much significant impact. It's forecast to be pretty powerful here. You can see in these pink colorings here, they're showing that a lot of these ensembles are showing a very deep hurricane in this part of the Atlantic, and it would be great if we can avoid any and all land impacts from this system. This is the 5-day forecast from the National Hurricane Center. A new one will be coming out within the next hour after this video. But you can see Tropical Storm Watch in yellow here for the northern Leeward Islands, and the system tracking north of those islands as it becomes a major hurricane by tomorrow evening, and remains a major hurricane as it begins to make that northward turn in the open Western Atlantic. But you can see in this cone, this white area is where the center of the system could track. There is wiggle room, like I just showed you on the GFS ensemble plot, and it's certainly something to still monitor in the Bahamas, Bermuda, and the US East Coast as we go in time. And talking about impacts to the northern Leeward Islands, we could see some tropical storm force winds, like I mentioned. This is the earliest reasonable arrival time of tropical storm force winds, and you can see across these northern islands, late tonight into tomorrow morning is the earliest reasonable time. And you can also see the probability of tropical storm force winds, generally 20 to 30% in all these areas. And that goes in part due to what I was talking about with the uneven wind field that we have with this system. Further west, you can see across the Turks and Caicos, you have until maybe Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon when tropical storm force winds might arrive in those locations. And further north across Bermuda, we're looking at middle of next week. So you have plenty of preparation time and plenty of time to watch the system as it continues tracking west. Rainfall-wise across the Leeward Islands, we could see some locally heavy rainfall, like I mentioned, especially in mountainous terrain across some of these islands like Puerto Rico. We could see several inches of rain across these islands with isolated atolls up to 6 inches on this forecast here across these islands. So make sure you're staying tuned to your local weather office as they will issue any alerts for flooding if they need to. And finally, the system is going to be quite large in the Western Atlantic, and even though we will likely not be seeing the core of the system come ashore in areas like the US East Coast, we could certainly still see rough surf and rip current issues along the entire East Coast, and alongside that down to the Caribbean coast and up towards Canada as well, as the system will be generating very high waves near the center that will be expanding away from the system. You can see this is out to Wednesday morning next week, and you can see very high waves butting up against the landmass here across the US and the Caribbean, and that will likely lead to very rough weather at the beaches. So if you're going to the beaches for next week, just keep that in mind and stay tuned to lifeguard information and weather service information as well for the rip current risks that may be there along those coasts. That's all that I've got for today on Hurricane Erin. I'll have more videos on the system as it continues tracking west into the Western Atlantic. Stay safe in the Northern Caribbean islands as the system comes through. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.